Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Space Engineers Plus Me, episode 17. I'm Enigmius, and today we're putting the drills on the Blue Behemoth. The Blue Behemoth being our very large rolling mining vessel that we're building to replace the one that fell off the cliff. It's not my best name. I have to say, it's not my best name, but it fits. It's basically blue for all the chassis pieces. And it's absolutely gigantic relative to anything else that we've built. We're trying to learn from our past mistakes with pistons and drill blocks, because I really like the idea of having drills on pistons and forcing them into the ground and then pulling them back up and then moving the chassis and then pushing the drills back down again and just kind of going that way. But our previous experiences with pistons, I don't even really think it mattered what was on the end of them. It was just our experience with the pistons themselves was not a very positive or productive one. They tended to like to break on us. Now, one of the things that I thought might be a contributing aspect to that is that the pistons were horizontal. And the pistons, as we've discussed, are two pieces. There's the base, and then there's a little gray section on top of it that's the piston head, and they're not connected. They're not one unit. So whatever you connect the base to, the piston head will be detached from that assembly, whatever it is. So it's kind of weak at that spot, it seems, and it likes to break apart. And we have to be very aware of that. And with the first ship where we used this piston and drill idea, it was horizontal. And I kind of feel like the whole horizontal length and the wobbly drills on the end of it, it was just a disaster waiting to happen. So in this case, the pistons are vertical so that they're pulling down instead of kind of doing this shearing business on the end of them, which may or may not help. It's a large ship setup. We're using all large ship components because it's a large ship designation on this one, which apparently some of the components are a little bit more robust. It's not just that they're bigger, it's that they seem to perform better at what they do relative to their smaller counterparts. We'll see. There's only so much testing we can do when we're in the middle of building, but that'll be one of the things that we'll be looking at, is how well everything holds together. The other thing that I wanted to take into account was building on the suggestion that people gave me to use landing gears to hold the drills steady while the ship was moving until you're getting ready to drill, and then release them so that they can do their business with the pistons. I don't think it's a bad idea to use landing gears, but there was just something about using landing gears that was a little bit unsettling to me. I wasn't really comfortable with the idea, just from I guess you could say from a purely aesthetic point of view. We're using these landing gears that apparently are somehow latching to an aspect of the ship or an element of the ship, and that between whatever the landing gear is connected to and whatever it's grasping basically becomes one unit. It makes sense. But there's blocks that do that specific thing, and they don't kind of upset my sensibilities, I guess you could say. The blocks are called merge blocks, and that's basically exactly what they do, is they fit together, and then when you provide power, they fuse together, and that's how you can come up with things that would otherwise be detached now suddenly being considered one unit. So if we can use merge blocks to connect the drills to the chassis so that they're all considered to be one unit, it shouldn't really matter what's going on with the pistons while the vehicle is moving. They'll just be sort of in between, doing their thing. And if they fly to pieces, then we know that something is just horribly, horribly wrong, and we'll have to seriously rethink about ever using pistons ever again. Having said that, we're going to do what we can to learn what we can. The worst thing that can happen is that it doesn't work and it fails spectacularly, and we'll get it recorded, and then we can all share a little bit of a chuckle at my expense. The best case scenario is that it works and we learn a little bit something about how something in the game works that we didn't know before. So it's not that bad. Now, we're up top of this whole assembly, very, very carefully connecting all of the piston stacks together. There's 3 stacks of pistons, and I wanted to make sure that they all came together. I'm using this, you can see all the unwelded blocks that I've built up, sort of like a scaffolding or a gantry to hold everything in place. So I have to be very, very careful about what I grind, because if I grind the wrong block, it's going to detach all of the pistons and drills, and I'll have to grind them down and rebuild everything. So we're going a little bit slow. You could see every once in a while we have to add a new block here and there to just kind of support everything and keep it together. Eventually, we'll get it all welded together and connected with conveyors and conveyor tubes, And then we'll connect these conveyors and conveyor tubes to the conveyors that are leading to the storage that we built on the back of the vehicle. So there's a couple of conveyors that I built them, I welded them, they're blue, so they're a little bit discreet, down at the base near the drills that we can connect the tubes to, and then everything that the drills pull up will go back towards the back of the ship. Some of it will go in the arc furnaces for immediate processing, and some of it will go directly into storage. Bob's your uncle. We've got a successful mining vehicle if everything works. So we just have to get everything in place and get that done. There's a lot of trips back and forth between storage and whatever we're working on because there are just so many things that go into the stuff that we're building, and we're so limited in terms of what we can carry at any given time. Once we get a section done, we look very carefully to make sure that we're not going to be grinding down something that we're going to need, and then we could eventually get down to the point of having everything in the clear. We get another conveyor block. I have a bit of a concern when it comes to transferring items between different kinds of storage. If they don't have a conveyor block or a conveyor tube in between, I don't really have a lot of confidence that they're going to move properly. I could be wrong. It could be that any kind of inventory can transfer push-pull to any other kind of inventory depending on what's trying to be pushed and pulled more than what it's connected to. But I didn't want to take my chances, so it might be a little bit overkill in terms of all of the conveyors and conveyor tubes that I'm using, but I'm okay with that. I'm very much okay with that. It doesn't really bother me that we'll have a little bit of excess. One of the things that did kind of bother me was this whole business of building the entire structure out of conveyor tubes. And again, it bothers my sensibilities. If I imagine building like this great big mining derrick in the real world, a great big tower with pistons, hydraulic pistons pushing drills down into the ground, and I hold it all together with heating ducts, that's the image that I get when we use conveyor tubes to connect everything. And it's not because we had to. We did have to run conveyor tubes. Here's one of the conveyors that I spotted in place and hide it as blue. But the whole idea was we had to build the conveyor tubes down to get to the conveyor blocks that we're connecting to now so that we can connect it to the storage. We might as well use that as the thing that's holding up the drills as well. But I had a hard time with the whole idea. So I decided that what we would do is get all the conveyor tubes built, make sure that everything is connected in terms of moving items around, because that's kind of the most important thing, and then build a frame over the whole thing that's kind of interesting and maybe a little bit neat to look at and a little bit surprising, as in, wow, nobody would have really thought of that 6 months ago. So I built like this circular frame that's holding the entire piston assembly with the drills and the conveyor tubes, and it kind of looks neat on this gigantic rolling monstrosity that hasn't done any rolling yet. It's actually still propped up on a temporary landing gear. But as far as design elements go that makes it stand out and look a little bit unique, I kind of like it. I'm kind of happy with that. It's the one thing that I can look at on this vehicle and feel confident that, yes, I'm happy with this right now. Everything else is kind of just wait and see sort of a scenario. And I turned on the reactor for the first time as well, so that we could mess around with the pistons and do all these other things, but also test the latching on the merge blocks. And I realized that we really need to put some attention to the lighting on this vehicle. We've got one headlight on the front that's not going to be particularly useful, but we also need some headlights facing down so that we can see what we're doing, because so much of the game is played at night. If you don't have lighting, it's just really kind of a nightmare. Now, this is the testing of the merge blocks. These are the blocks that are going to hold the drills to the rest of the chassis while the vehicle is moving, so we don't have to worry about the drills moving around and snapping the pistons. That's the theory. Anyway, and basically it's a lot of going and looking at the merge blocks to see if they're lined up, and then running back to the cockpit and moving things around, moving the pistons that are holding the drills and moving the pistons that are holding one of the merge blocks, and then go back and check and see if it's lined up. And then go back and make some adjustments. The reason is because the pistons, with the piston's head on top of them, are a little bit larger than just a regular size block. So there's an offset. This is an example of what happens when you push the merge blocks together and they don't want to fit, is we snapped a big chunk off. So we're going to try again you can see this is what it looked like before it broke off. There's a pair of merge blocks on the bottom and a pair of merge blocks on the top. The ones on the top don't want to go together. And it took me a while to figure out why. The ones on the bottom will latch. And when they do, that's when they snap things and make it so that things break off, which is kind of disappointing. But the whole idea with this, with the two pairs of merge blocks, is that if it had worked, it would have made a solid connection between the chassis and the drills, and none of the pistons would have been involved. There would have been no places whatsoever where the pistons could have been a weak link that would cause the drills to make things break while the vehicle was in motion. Fortunately, I found another way to set things up so that I didn't have to rely on paired merge blocks in two sets to make the whole thing come together and make the drill connection to the chassis solid. But it was a little bit iffy. It was a little bit touch and go, trying to get everything set up the way that I wanted it. Now that it's done, I can say merge blocks, I think, are a much better option for me in terms of just my preferences. It's just very pure opinion kind of thing. Very much preferred over the idea of landing gears doing the same thing. You can see trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do here to make this bastard work. And really all I can think of is we've got the two down on the bottom that are latched properly. The two on top won't latch because of the way everything comes together. You get an error saying that they're trying to merge when there would be two blocks that would be in the same thing. It was like Jean-Claude Van Damme in Time Cop, and same matter cannot occupy same space, is kind of what it reminded me of. So while I had them merged, I was like, that's okay for now, we'll figure out something better. And we did. We ended up finding something better. So now, this thing is basically done, which is kind of exciting because it's very large and it's nearly done. There will be little tweaks. There are going to be lights that we have to add to it. There's probably going to be some adjustments. You can see here we've got some injectors on the side. Those are for stone. We can just... It's kind of like the hot rod effect. Instead of flames, we have like little boulders plopping out from time to time. Not the best placement, I don't think. I think if we put them on the underside of the vehicle, it will work better, especially once we start drilling and moving, because then the stone will be dumped into the pits that we're leaving behind. So that's kind of something for me to keep in mind. The next episode, we're going to be looking at the second phase of the build, which is going to be the aerial section that detaches completely from the ground section, and it will have its own reactor so that it has its own power supply, all the thrusters and things that we need to lift and move around, storage, and possibly some things like hydrogen storage, maybe even oxygen storage, a properly airtight cockpit that's pressurized so that we can leave atmosphere with this whole thing and go out into space and do crazy things with moons and stuff like that. Possibly, I'm thinking, if this vehicle ends up working in terms of gathering resources as quickly as I hope it will, I would just as soon like to build a dedicated space exploration / mining vehicle to take to the moon and leave this thing down on the planet, so that if things are going badly on the moon, worst case scenario, we can always come back to the planet and mine the hell out of it until we're squared away to move on. So if you're enjoying the series and you want to be notified about the next one, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on Twitter. Links for that in the information box below the video. Leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next episode, and take care.